Well, many thanks for staying with us. And in case you're joining us right now, you're just in time for the big conversation here on KTN Prime in regards to public concern, rights and matters, national stability in the middle, or rather amidst the fuel crisis and the high cost of fuel here in the country. Of course, a cost and a price of fuel, rather, that led to widespread paralysis of the transport sector on Monday and Tuesday, even as the government tries to find a lasting solution to that particular issue. Now, concerns have been raised in regards to what can the government do? Can the government, of course, look at the taxation on fuel? Can the government add more in terms of cushioning Kenyans from the high fuel prices? We've seen the government use the Petroleum Development Levy. Of course, 6.2 billion was injected last month. Another 5 was injected this particular month. But of course, there are still concerns in regards to that, and there are calls for the government to do more. And regardless of that, we did see people, or rather Kenyans, hitting the streets on Monday and Tuesday. But even as they did that, again, like it has been the norm and the tradition here in the country, sadly, I should say, we saw Kenyans losing their lives to police bullets and police excesses in general, amid concerns also over the conduct of the police, time and again, in regards to how they handle protesters here in the country. We've seen leaders come out to address this particular issue, and the political class, some say, are playing politics with this issue, while others try to play tribal politics on such an important issue of national discourse. Now we're here to, of course, take stock and make sense of all that. And of course, joining me right now is Mr. Suba Churchill, the Executive Director of the Kenya National Civil Society Center. Very good evening to you, sir.
Good evening.
Many thanks for making time.
Thank you, and thanks for having me here.
Many thanks. Also joining us this particular evening is Professor ktnnews, a former NCIC Commissioner. Prof, very good evening to you, sir.
Good to be here.
You're very much welcome. We're also expecting the Law Society of Kenya President, that is Mr. Charles Kanjama, who will be joining us in not so long. Let me begin with you, Professor ktnnews. Let's begin with what Kenyans will be waking up to tomorrow morning, first of all, on the front page of the Standard. And this is in regards to the absence of Professor Kithure Kindiki, the Deputy President, on, on the forefront, him not being on the forefront of these discussions and deliberations, even as the country seeks, or the government seeks to find a solution to the fuel crisis. From where you sit as a governance expert, his absence, we've seen Interior Sis Kipchumba Murkomen taking center stage and taking control. We saw Nairobi Governor Arthur Johnson Sakaja. We also saw blogger Dennis Itumbi in that meeting that was held on Monday night. From where you sit as a governance expert, what does that say, the absence of the DP? Because we know, sorry, it should be the acting president or head of state when the president is away.
Yeah, in normal societies, the chain of command. It starts with the president, then the deputy, then it moves downwards. So it's an indication that the country is in a very dangerous position where senior officials hold offices by name. And it's not just Kindiki. I think the commissioner, the Inspector General of Police, Kanja, is one of those people holding office by name only. And now why am I saying that? There's been issues about the castle rustling, people dying, 156 people being killed in 1 month, and the Inspector General of Police going to Meru, promising them this thing is coming to an end, and nothing works. So what is happening should not be happening in governance. People should hold office and execute the mandate of that office as per law so established. That is not happening. So I don't think it's just Kendege. I think if you listen to Bishop Ojijo, he talked about this. He was telling people from Luo Nyanza that you are holding office, but you are not in office because you can't execute the mandate of that office. I think these people have turned governance upside down. And that means they will not be able to manage the country. That is not how the country is supposed to run. When you trust me in an office, you allow me to execute the mandate of that office, or you fire me. Okay. But you can't just keep me there and then allow other people because I mean, that was a crisis.
Okay.
So people expecting to see the deputy president,
fair
or they expect to see Felix Kosgei.
Just, I'll give you time to finish up on that, Professor Gitile Netuli. Let me come to you, Mr. Suba Churchill. Like he puts it, is it a one-man show? Because if the president is not around, then we're being told, let us wait for the president to come back so that this issue can be, resolved.
Okay, to be honest, I didn't think much about it. Of course, I saw the deputy president was somewhere, speaking to the same issue and trying to explain that, the fuel increase is not, a purely Kenyan thing. It's a global crisis and so on and so forth. I also, before even the meeting took place with the stakeholders, saw the CS for Energy, Opiyo Wandayi, saying that, once he was done with what he was doing somewhere in the field, he would be linking up with his transport counterpart to look at it. So the strategy I saw was one of playing down the seriousness of the issue. And that perhaps explains why the deputy president appeared, at least at the time when the meeting with the stakeholders was taking place, not seized of the issue, but somehow watching a number of television stations, I saw him speaking to the issue and trying to explain that, it's not a purely Kenyan issue, trying to explain that, government had brought in certain interventions to cushion Kenyans and so on, explaining that the government had halved the VAT on fuel, petroleum products by half, from 16 to 8%. So I, as I'd said, I didn't quite think much about it. Perhaps didn't see it in this light, but somehow it got resolved at the CS level, and at times, when government wants to kind of downplay certain things, they handle it, they leave it to people who are fairly junior, as a way of perhaps saying there is nothing much, the presence of the big shots could have changed under the circumstances.
Okay.
So that's how I saw it.
I'm actually surprised that Suba is buying that argument. Now, I'm surprised because this is not a global issue. It's not an international issue. The fuel crisis, first of all, is an extremely local issue. Because if you look at the region as a whole.
But even before you look at it from the, the regional level, Prof.
Yes.
Just before we shift gears fully to this particular issue, because you also, of course, commentate on matters of politics.
Yeah.
Is absence on the front line?
Yeah, that's what we are saying. A situation where the whole country is paralyzed.
Yes.
The whole country is not moving. And then I think about 12 or so people died or something like that. That is not a small issue, because a death of one single Kenyan is not a small issue. So you wouldn't expect the deputy president to be there telling us what is happening, because he's the deputy president. You would also expect the president, wherever he is, to communicate because of the issue of communication. So I don't think this thing was a small matter. But also what I'm saying is, you see, I expect, because of the organization he ends, I expect him to know exactly what is happening with the fuel. What is happening with the cost of fuel in Kenya has zero to do with what is happening in the Middle East. Now, why am I using that? Okay. Because that is very able to use. I don't have to be a rocket scientist. I just have to look at Uganda and then look at Burundi, Rwanda. These people, they are all buying this fuel from the same place we buy. It crosses the same sea to Mombasa, then it's distributed from Mombasa. There is no way the fuel can be more expensive in Uganda, Rwanda, and in Burundi than in Kenya. Absolutely no way. So this is a problem we have created, and this is how we have created it. The Kenyan government, and I don't believe in just 2000 government, just Kenyan government, we have been having what is called an extractive state. Extractive state is actually a colonial state. A state where the people in power are not Kenyans. They are basically foreigners. So they look at an opportunity to basically make you poorer, collect. Now, this is how they're doing it. Usually the fuel, the petrol, super, has been taxed more than in diesel, because in diesel has been considered to be the poor man's energy source, because it is the tractor in the farm, diesel. It is the Matatu. It is the lorry that brings the food to Nairobi. So if you make diesel expensive, you are basically oppressing the most vulnerable. So previous governments have concentrated on taxing diesel, petrol, super petrol more, because that was considered fueling luxury vehicles. But now, this government have seen that in diesel will bring more money, because the economy expanded. Economy has expanded. So there's more trucks on the road using diesel. There's more matatus. You see, the transport system has expanded 20 times. So now what they are doing, they are pivoting to where you are making more money per day without regard to who gets hurt in the process, which is the most vulnerable. The person who is buying one cabbage in the market today, because that person is earning 300 shillings, which is what majority of the Kenyans earn in these bars. Okay? So why would you do that when you are in a position not to do it? You do that because you are not really a Kenyan. In your mind, you are running an extractive, colonial, transactional state.
Okay, before I come back to Mr. Suba, would you, term some of these, taxes levied on petroleum products as predatory? Because there are concerns about some of it. There's, for example, the railway development levy, there's the merchant shipping. And when you look at, for example, border riders,
yes.
I mean, is this a proper way of getting revenue, or is it predatory taxation from where you said?
You have used a fantastic word, predatory. That's what it is. It's just an extractive levy. Look at them, merchant saving. What that got to do with that? These people should only be charging you for road levy, infrastructure, roads. Now you have petroleum development. Which petrol are you supposed to develop? You understand? So what they have done is packed, because it's easy to collect.
Okay.
They have packed levies for purposes of simply taxing you, but not doing anything. But even more important is if these billions they collect per month from this fuel, if they actually building our roads, we would be having a fantastic infrastructure. This money is being stolen, just like the money they borrow, they also steal it, because we don't see where all the trillions borrowed. And remember, I just said, this has nothing to do with exactly Ruto's government. This was happening in Uhuru Kenyatta's government also. The Kenyans got a government, which you can call a government of Kenya, only during the Nusu Mukate government. That was the time that the government concentrated on fixing Kenya as Kenya. But beyond that, it has always been an extractive, transactional, colonial government.
Mr. Suba, from the civil society space,
yes.
I don't know what how you view this issue of taxation, because like he has alluded to, of course, this tax is being collected, but at the end of the day, the biggest issue seems to be accountability and how this money has been used.
Yes, of course, there have been concerns about, first, the extent to which Kenyans are taxed. There have been concerns that Kenyans are overtaxed. Yet, for some of us who are privileged to be the framers of the Constitution, I remember in 2003, 2004, presiding over, the technical working group on citizenship and the Bill of Rights at Bomas of Kenya. We had very clear principles on taxation, that the burden of taxation needs to be shared equitably across generations so that we do not overburden, including issues of debts. But increasingly, as we implement that constitution, as we implement our fiscal policies, there's been a sense in which Kenyans have felt left to their own devices by our own representatives. You know, when you talk of government, at times people just focus on the executive. But the people who actually pass these taxes are our representatives, who, in their wisdom or lack of it, think or get persuaded by those who propose these tax measures that it is a good thing for the country. I've heard, for example, members of parliament, including those who chair committees on transport and so on, say that were it not for, road development levy, that our roads would not be. And of course, when you look at our roads generally, I remember when I went to go to vote, I normally vote in my village in Western Kenya. The stretch from what we call Total or Summit, Mau Summit, towards Kericho was like a farm. The road was terrible. And then people said, we are going to vote. I remember it was December, and we must vote out the regime at the time because this is not the state of roads. Now, today, when you travel across Kenya, we must admit that the state and conditions of our road, and even the network itself, is much more superior. Much more superior. So, is it because of these taxes? And at what point will we now say we have done enough so that we can now begin to reduce taxes for Kenyans? Of course, there is the issue of debts, again, that Kenyans are concerned about. People are concerned about the borrowing that went into expressway and so on and so forth. We rely on scholars like Professor here to perhaps do a study to tell us as Kenyans whether the benefits that have been derived from this road network can now pay off for the debts that were borrowed or the burdens that we are shouldering as Kenyans. Because we can no longer lament the fact that we borrowed to put up the expressway. Are there benefits that Kenyans are now deriving from good roads? We have seen studies, for example, when there is traffic jam, how much it costs in terms of man hours, just being stuck on traffic. And we have seen statisticians telling us that at times in Nairobi, when there is such a deadlock on our roads, the amount of man hours we lose, converted into monetary terms, costs a lot of money. And so, is there a study that can bring us to par in terms of whether, yes, money was borrowed during Uhuru's time, more borrowing is happening during Ruto's time? Is there any, cost-benefit analysis, for example, that we now need to do, rather than, and this is where, the university, the school community, can help us and say, yes, this money was borrowed, perhaps the cost of building the expressway was exaggerated. There have been a lot of concerns, including currently with the Rironi Mau Summit Road. But is there, in terms of Thika Road, for example, that has been there for a while, expressway has been there for a while, is there any benefit that is helping to push back on the debt burden? And I think these are studies that can help us.
Let me just give you those levies. Then I want to comment on Rironi because it's an interesting. The levies are excess duty, road maintenance levy, petroleum development levy, petroleum regulatory levy, railway development levy, and alteration levy, merchant shipping levy, and the value and then the tax. Those are the levies funded into the road. Now, why are they taxing in diesel more? Because the diesel is inelastic. People have to take produce to the market. People must dig in the shamba. So they know there's nothing you can do. Demand. Now, you mentioned Rironi Mau Summit. It's a fantastic example of how you run the country as if you are a foreigner. Because a contract was signed for that road for 150-something billion. The president comes and cancels that contract and issues it at a higher cost with a penalty of 7 billion. Why do you want to do that to your country? Now, you see, I'm giving that's just an example, but I can tell you, since independence, since Kenyatta, since Moi, since Uhuru and William Ruto, none of those presidents, maybe Moi was more patriotic actually. Moi was a little bit very patriotic.
Okay.
Like none of these people have been running this country as if they are Kenyans. They have been running it as if they are going somewhere else, as if they are not going to be here. Because if you read the Auditor General's report, it's full of delayed. You delay payment. You know when the payment is due. Instead of paying, you wait until they accumulate billions, then you pay after the accumulation because you have made a deal with the person you are delaying payment, who will delay, then you will pay you this, and this is what you are supposed to return. We have to outgrow that. Now about doing research, I'm not so sure if you want to do any research to find out that the money you have borrowed has not entered the economy. All you do is look what has been done from 1963 to when Kibaki handed over government to Uhuru Kenyatta. Kibaki, the Nusu Mugate government, because that's the only government that is after the people of Kenya, because it was also a government of national unity. Beyond all these loans, and handed Uhuru Kenyatta 1.89 trillion in debt, accumulated all the way from independence. And in building all these roads you are saying in Nairobi, you know, all the roads, the Thika Road, the Outer Ring Road, the bypasses, the Southern Bypass, 189. How much money did Uhuru Kenyatta borrow in those 10 years? Where is those roads? How much money has William Ruto borrowed?
And of course, that brings the concern about ODS debt.
Yeah, ODS debt.
Okay.
So this is why we really need, and the president was talking about this when he was a candidate. Mm-hmm. He said we are going to have a convention on state capture, which really people thought that was a fantastic thing because it will put an end to impunity.
Okay.
And it will put an end to client state, where you just design what you need to do, then you tell the government that advertise this one and give it to me. Okay? This is how ODS in debt has come. And you see what they did in 2014. They amended Article 206 of the Constitution through amending the Financial Management Act to allow them to spend public money outside the consolidated fund. This is why he said something very important. What this country needs is a good parliament and a good county assembly. Because you have a good parliament and a good county assembly, you can't have all this abuse we are having.
But you've both alluded to having a good parliament, and in his own words, he said, in their wisdom or lack of it, there are also concerns about the people we elect into these offices.
Exactly.
And there are concerns about, for example, the current parliament being captured by the executive. And that has been the concern for a very long time, that the parliament only approves what the executive wants. It does not, really provide oversight.
It doesn't defend us.
Exactly.
Because it's supposed to defend us.
Now, if you look at, and this is something that I've alluded to time and again, gentlemen, if you look at, for example, the requirements for you to be a member of parliament, you only need to have a Form 4 certificate. If you look at the standard and the quality of leaders, can they really, that we have currently, can they really, push this agenda that we want? Can they really hold those in positions of power, the executive, accountable? Can they push for this issue of taxation? Can they push for what Kenyans do want?
I will tell you this. We have one of the most educated parliament today. And almost 3/4 youthful. Not youth necessarily, but youthful. Mm-hmm. If you compare the current parliament, of course, very large in number, until the speakers have to ration the amount of time allocated. If you compare that to the parliament of the 80s and 90s, when Martin Shikuku did not even have a degree, when Jaramogi Oginga Odinga did not have a degree, would speak on the floor of parliament for 3 hours. So it's not about education. I think we are the only country who attempted to do what, in my view, I knew was unconstitutional, even as we were doing it at Bomas. Mm-hmm. But you see, the idea of a degree, even for president, we know it was being made for one particular individual.
But Mr.
So it is not the lack of education.
What is the problem then?
It is the moral aptitude. What is lacking in our leadership today, and you'd go there, actually the people to blame for the poor leadership in parliament are Kenyans themselves. Go there and just try to say, I'll stand for an MCA, and see how people are queuing for handouts. It's Kenyans to blame.
So
it is a Kenyan problem. We have brought it upon ourselves.
Well,
what is the influence of money in politics today? Why are everybody aspiring to run, engaging in fake gold business? It's huge. Have you seen any of those fake gold businesses, people convicted? They'll never be convicted because they have realized that all these things about education do not matter. All these things about integrity do not matter. How many times, even in the standard media here, do we publish advertisements must meet the requirements of Chapter 6? Yet public money is being stolen in public offices every day.
But let me ask.
Yet those who are in charge of those offices met the requirements of Chapter 6 of the Constitution.
Okay, let me ask.
So the question is meeting the requirement of Chapter 6 a one-off affair? Or is this something that should be constantly reviewed so that any moment you fall short of it, you are out of office? Now, how many, for example, are we being told in the public service, for example, entered with fake certificates?
I think
something basic as Kenya Certificate of Secondary Education. People falsify, get degrees, or fail to get drop out, then falsify their degree certificate, get jobs. They are in our public service.
What the Churchill is telling you is it's really, we can't say Kenyans as such. We need to look at the leadership and how the country was started. The problem is actually how we started. We started with this self-aggrandizement as a principle. In other words, self-service. We didn't start this country with a leader for Kenya. Okay? Kenyatta started the country for himself. You understand? He didn't start because you see all the land grabbing, all the impunity that progressively moved into subsequent governments started at that level. In other words, we didn't start Kenya with Nyerere. We did not start Kenya with Mandela. We did not start Kenya with an Ameka Kabro. We started Kenya with, in my opinion, somebody maybe who could have actually been robbing banks, but we gave him the country. Now, he transferred that bad manners as a culture. So now it has become a culture because we have a wonderful template for managing this country, the 2010 Constitution. But it's very hard to remove culture from ourselves. And this is why the next government, it will have to put an end to impunity. It will have to follow the law, the Constitution properly. You see, he says that it's not enough to produce clearance certificates and then you get the job. It's supposed to be continuous. Integrity is not a one-day affair. It's continuous as long as you hold that office.
It boils down to institutional failure as well.
That is why we have normalized it, because Murugumen can come, the minister in charge of internal security, who will look upon to hold this country together. He can say, Wagi approach police station, shoot, not arrest. He can say the demonstration is about a Kalenjin president. When there was a Kikuyu president, there was no demonstration. A minister is saying that. And then now you can look at the quality of the kind of people we are giving very serious jobs. You understand? Because that is the most serious job you have in this country. Okay,
I want you to pause there, Prof, and Mr. Suba. I want us to listen to what the former Deputy President, DCP party leader, Rigathi Gachagua said, as well as Interior CS Kipchumba Murkomen in regards to this issue of fuel here in the country, and then we continue this conversation.
I dare say that the leaders of Matatu industry at that point in time never protested against the government. So the question you should be asking yourself, why did they feel that it was okay to understand President Uhuru Kenyatta, but when it is President William Ruto, they should go to the streets? You should ask yourself, why did they not stop their vehicles just less than 4 years ago? And why is it that in the administration of President William Ruto, they have stopped their vehicles from coming to the streets? There must be something. There must be a certain level of profiling that applies to William Ruto that does not apply to President Uhuru Kenyatta.
At any one time, there is a problem in Kenya trying to bring President Uhuru Kenyatta and Rigathi Gachagua. Kipchumba Murkomen, for the record, Uhuru Kenyatta is not the president of Kenya. William Ruto is the president of Kenya. The buck stops with him. He cannot blame Uhuru Kenyatta for mismanaging the country, for destroying a country that was up and running. President Uhuru Kenyatta handed over a country that is working, with a working education system, working health system, with a country that was secure. 4 years down the line, there is no country.
Fair enough. Mr. Suba, let me begin with you before I engage Prof.
Now,
we seem to be also playing politics with this issue, and there's also the introduction of, the politics of, ethnicity, which is very dangerous, especially when we're heading into the general election.
Of course, Murkomen, who is a friend, by the way, he worked with us in the sector before he joined politics, is alluding to possible sabotage of the current government by those who are loyal to the previous one. So that's politics. The immediate former deputy president is saying things that one would call politics of opportunism. He's saying that President Uhuru Kenyatta handed over an economy that was working. But you remember when he took over
exactly
as
the point.
Ruto's deputy.
Empty coffers and all.
Empty coffers. So I watched this speech and I said, are our mind that short to have forgotten, what people said just the other day? What did he say about Uhuru Kenyatta? Are Kenyans able to reflect and say, and this is the tragedy of Kenyan leadership and politics, that, we largely elected President Ruto on account that he had differed with his former boss, Uhuru Kenyatta. Today, the immediate former president is a darling of certain Kenyans because he was impeached. And on that basis, he has leadership qualities. You see how we get it wrong? So this is the kind of, in my view, hypocrisy that I'm not ready to entertain. And I've told people as much that even some of the people that Professor is looking forward to and saying the next leadership must, they can't. They all have baggage. Look at extrajudicial killings. Some of the people now posturing as potential leaders to take over government in 2027 have skeletons in their cupboards. Yeah, and some of them have told us that, if you want me to account, for example, of killings in Rivayala, then we must backdate it to 1960. I mean, that's somebody avoiding accountability, honestly. So we must accept as Kenyans that there seems to be a dearth of leadership, a scarcity of integrity in this country, that we continue being taken in circles by people who just the other day, there was a video going around of the same immediate former president addressing a crowd in Nyahururu, Nyandarua, and explaining why the people must not blame the new leadership, in which he was the deputy president, for high fuel prices. Pleading with the people, please don't throw stones aside. What is he saying yesterday? He's saying President Ruto is personally responsible. And yet, when he was in the government, he justified all this. What we are saying here is, there's really nothing new, if you asked me. There's really nothing new, if you asked me.
But the point is, Mr. Suba,
the immediate former deputy president is saying that he did not defend,
1 minute.
that he did not contradict when he was in leadership.
Just a moment, gentlemen. Just a moment, because Mr. Suba, this cuts across, cuts across the political divide.
Exactly.
Just a moment.
Exactly.
Because when you say the DP said this, when it was the DP is now singing this,
Yeah, exactly.
a different tune, the same applies to the president. Because the
Exactly.
president, the president when he was the president lamented about taxation. But this is the same, even for the CS.
What I'm trying to say here is,
okay,
we must not view what the immediate former deputy president is saying as if it's the best thing that has ever been said.
Okay.
These are people who, these are turncoats who will today say this, tomorrow say another thing, and because they have learned that as Kenyans we are gullible,
I think you are
that we buy line, hook and sinker, everything they say at any given time. We don't go back to history.
Okay, let's listen.
That's what I'm saying, that as somebody who has been part of this process, by the way, I've been in institutional for 35 years.
30 seconds, okay.
And I've a very good memory of all these characters in the political space. I've even told you that when Murkomen was going to run, I contributed my little coin because he was in our sector. He said, please, we wish you success in your candidature. And he won, and we are happy for that. What we are seeing is a scenario where Kenyans are being taken in circles by the very characters that have been part of the problems that we are afflicted. Yet, some of us are expected to see them as angels because now they are not together.
Fair enough, Prof. Come in.
Let me come in because I think he has pivoted away from Murkomen's statement.
Okay.
And this is how
I did comment about
let him finish.
This is how we need to look at what Murkomen is saying.
Okay.
Because if we don't control the emotions, this is how leaders basically kill the country. The issue here was a strike, Matatu strike. And that's what Murkomen says. He says you have removed your vehicles from the streets because the president is a Kalenjin. When the president was a Kikuyu, you did not do it. First of all, he has lied there and he knows it.
That is incorrect, true.
Because there were 4 Matatu strikes when Uhuru Kenyatta was president, number 1. Number 2, you can't tell us this was a Kikuyu thing. Because it's not just Kikuyus who will be hurt if the fuel stays where it is. It's the entire country. Is there anybody who has a tractor, who has a shamba? Is there anybody who buys a cabbage? Because the cabbage must come from Nyandaro to Nairobi. So you can't, as the minister, pivot a situation like this into a tribe. Because that tells us that you are not going to solve that problem because you don't consider it as a problem. You consider it as a tribe issue. And this is what happens with any incompetent person. Wherever you are incompetent, you externalize your problem. And that means you can't actually solve it because there's only way problems are solved by leaders, proper leaders. You internalize it. You say, what is it that we are doing wrong that we should do? For example, this G to G thing is basically a front. The market shouldn't be allowed to set prices. So instead of Murkomen telling us it's the Kikuyu's routing, he should be asking what would happen if we remove G to G and allow and return back the open tender system. What would happen? What would be the result? So he can ask the expert to crush the numbers and tell him what the results are likely to be. But he pivot away completely from the problem and try to feed us with the tribe. That is not going to help him, and that will not help Kenya.
Because, you see, in his address, he highlighted several issues, and one of them was, he said some politicians are fueling intolerance and ethnic bigotry. And then he goes ahead to, do the same thing he accuses certain secular politicians doing. And at the end of the day, we're shifting the goalpost. We're not looking at the real issue here. We're shifting into politics of, division. And the country's, the political temperatures in the country rising.
It's not that I pivoted from the issue. Politicians will always be politicians.
Okay.
In a country where
I don't want you to say that. I want to insist.
Politics.
I would be happy if you can insist that integrity good governance, accountability, and transparency.
But the question is, Mr. Suba, fair enough. The question is, how do we instill that? How do we ensure that we have leaders who are, have integrity within them? How do we install leaders in positions of power who can, take the country to, or steer the country rather, to the direction that we want, a direction that is free from issues of, politics of ethnicity? Because we need to move away from that.
If you asked me, and I'll be talking at this a little more in depth. We need a whole society approach to this, because today in our parliament we have people who are convicted for years for stealing millions and billions of shillings, and they're still in service. When they were convicted, we saw people in their constituencies, protesting. So and that's why I'm saying, if we do not have a whole of society approach to this, as long as Kenyans still think so-and-so is one of our own, as long as Kenyans in my constituency today, there are so many candidates, aspirants. People know, some of them have court cases to do with the fake gold business. Some of them even call themselves, those minerals. And people are happy partaking of the handouts. And what are the chances? Chances are high. In the last parliament, the current parliament, the immediate former CS for internal security, Fred Matiang'i, told us that there are a number of wash people on the ballot paper, and they got elected.
Let me tell you what
it is now.
Let me tell you what he's really asking you. Okay. He's asking you to ask him, how do we get out of that situation?
And that is exactly
what you need to tell him is, we need a president, because you see there's something called collective consciousness. In fact, to just support you in political science, we say that the government is an innocent mirror of the people it represents.
Exactly.
That's what you have been trying to say. So how do you change that mirror? You will need to look for a president who is clean, who now the country can trust, who when he speaks, we know, like Chairman Mao told them that this is a great leap forward. He told them we must move, because we can't think this country will never move. He said, I know some people will oppose us, we will kill them for their own good. But remember, Chairman Mao didn't even have pockets. He is not doing this thing for himself. So we need somebody we can give our heart and our soul. And that person can change the culture overnight. Remember, when Kibaki came in, people were arresting policemen on the road for taking bribe. Remember that. The consciousness and already shifted.
I personally led a group to reclaim KICC.
Exactly.
I led the group that drove away employees.
This is what the country needs.
Okay, yes. I want us to look at, you said the voters are the problem. We Kenyans vote in leaders who lack integrity, leaders who, you've said, talked about wash, and that is what the former CS for Interior, immediate former, did say. But when you say Kenyans line up to be given money so that they can vote, one would look at it from possibly two angles. Is it just an issue of, Kenyans also not being morally upright, or is it also an issue of the economic situation that they find themselves in?
Good question.
It is both. If I went by the economic situation, you'll be asking me to justify the looting I saw yesterday. That people looted almost every business in Murang'a town, and you want me to say it is because of the economic situation. That would be justifying a crime. And that's why even as Kenyans, as some of us who have been fighting for rights, we must now gather enough courage and tell Kenyans,
Mr. Suba,
the burning of cars we saw.
We're shifting from.
Just a moment. Just a moment. I'm still asking a very crucial question.
Just a moment. Just a moment, because we'll talk about the issue of looting and destruction.
Exactly.
Let's address this issue of handouts in terms of elections.
It is not different. The mentality of queuing for handouts is not different from the looting we saw yesterday. It's the same thing. Our economic situation. No.
Just a moment.
You see, I came to the program
Yes.
to also share my opinion.
Fair enough. And I'm giving you time to do that.
Okay. That if I were to go by to justify that, Kenyans are queuing, then we are not solving the problem. We must educate Kenyans to understand that this person for whom you are today queuing to pick 50 shillings is going to be in power to make laws for the next 5 years, to impose taxes on fuel that you are demonstrating against, that will hurt you for 5 good years.
Goes back to civic education.
Exactly. So, of course, it's unfortunate that even some of us who led this process of helping Kenyans to get a new constitution did not have sufficient resources, and as a country. And of course, with the dismantling of USAID and the shrinking donor ecosystem and so on, there is a diminishing availability of resources to educate Kenyans so that they are able to exercise their rights with some degree of responsibility. But I think if we partnered, for example, civil society with the media, we need to tell Kenyans that, yes, Article 37 gives you the right, but that right must be exercised. If we don't do that, we'll be the victims. We'll be the victims. The second point I want to say is that for us to get the leader that my good professor, he was my lecturer, by the way. He taught me at the university. For us to get the leader that he's talking about, it must come from the Kenyans. And for me, the starting point is the Kenyan voters. You have seen how reluctant young people are to even register as a voter, which is a civic duty. They don't understand that in some societies, including the US and even here, people fought to have the right to vote and elect leaders. And today we are happy that we have that right. For us to get that leader, today you cannot say that there is no option out there. Among those who have expressed interest in running this country, there are 1 or 2 who can give us the leadership that he's talking about. But are they gaining traction? No.
Why not?
They are not gaining traction because they are not dispensing, they are not money dispensers. There are 2 people there. I tell you, if you wanted a good leader and elected Okia Omtata, he will give you the leadership he's talking about. If you went to the queue on the election day in August 2027 and voted for the immediate former Chief Justice, David Maraga, he will give you the leadership he's craving. But have you seen their meetings? A handful of people. Kenyans are not interested. And that's why for me, when the IBC was being reconstituted, and I want to tell you this story.
Briefly,
a friend of mine called me and said, Suba, you have been in this sector for a while. Who do you think can make a good chair for the IBC? And I said, if you want an IBC that will deliver free and fair elections, allow me to approach Maraga, because I do not know him personally, but there are people who know him that I know. And I'll ask him to apply. Unfortunately, when I tried to find out whether Maraga would be interested, I learned that he was already, entertaining the idea of becoming president. And unfortunately...
But they would never have had him anyway.
They would never have had him.
Why not?
But the people of Kenya have a chance to have him as their president.
Fair enough. Why not?
Why not? I don't see them electing him.
Because if you see the way IBC was recruited, was basically personally recruited by the president and Raila Odinga. It wasn't really a national recruitment. You see, the amendment they did to that act allows the parliament, allows Raila's wing of parliament to get 1 person. I'm talking about the panel.
The selection panel,
the selection panel.
And there was controversy and debate surrounding the panel.
Yes, the panel. Yes. And then William Ruto to get. Then after that, after they got that, they handed to know you personally to be shortlisted. Okay? They handed to know you personally. Remember during the interview that the chairman now declared that he was somewhere in Zaire or something, that he actually didn't apply. He said that to Parliament, I think, when he was being confirmed. So if you run, I think after that, then the Standard, he ran the article And they said who has been brought in by Mudavandi, who has been brought in by who. In other ones, the panel was brought in by the political class and the people associated with the government. So if I was advising the opposition, the people want to replace Ruto, they needed to treat that body as Ruto's IBC. And that is why the people need to pay attention to the petition now before court, which is supposed to declare that the collated results from polling stations are as final as the result from the polling station. Because you see, the court ruled that that is the nearest, the polling station nearest to the voter. The place where those polling station results are brought together is also as nearer to the voter than in Nairobi. Because what we saw in the last election, and the CEO of IBC, Marijani,
Hussein Majani, yes,
said on Citizen TV that only the chairman and access to the computer where the results were coming in.
Okay, gentlemen.
Okay.
But
so
the declaration you are asking has been made in the Maina
yes.
Kiai case.
Yeah, Maina Kiai case needs to be extended to constituency. Then, and that's what the law requires. If you look at that 138, it says when more than one person is appointed for president.
Prof,
yes.
When you say that is where our problem or the problem begins, and then probably it turns out not to be a fair process. When there are questions about the referee of a match and the process that he or the team was selected is in question, then how do we solve that particular problem?
That problem after this election, we need to have a commission, the equivalent of Judicial Service Commission. Mm-hmm. And once they appoint you, they just need to give the president a number he cannot change. He doesn't have to be given a choice because the president is a participant in the election. So when we have an external body, the equivalent of Judicial Service Commission, and then they want 5 commissioners, they simply select the 5 commissioners and the president should not have an option in appointing them because he is a participant. Mm-hmm. So the formula we're having now is bound to be abused. Yes, so we should not be having that formula. Now I'm trying to remember is in discussion on whether we can give hope on the people of Kenya. And my point is we shouldn't. I think the Kenyans have demonstrated that they can actually think extremely maturely. Why do I say so? I look at the president, the current president, William Ruto. The president was a perfect candidate. Mm-hmm. He told the country all the right things he was going to do. The bottom-up philosophy was fantastic actually when it's explained, the way he was explaining it, because we have constitution on top-down. So it meant that what we are dealing with today will not happen. People understood that. They listened to him. And they voted for him on the basis of that. The other incident was the change of government in 2002. The country's consciousness had shifted to an extent that they were objecting to any police collecting money on the road. So we are not irredeemable. I think we can be redeemed. But we need somebody morally upright. We don't need the moral associated with the Christianity because we have seen that is really not delivering. This corruption is all being done by Christians. Okay? So what we need is actually, like he said here, he talked about Omutata. He has demonstrated that he's a stickler to the law. Because if we just stick to the law, we fix Kenya. Problem is impunity. We have cultivated impunity from independence because Murkomen can say what he's saying, but nobody is telling him to resign because we have normalized impunity. People who murdered the Kenyans in 2007, none of them was ever held to account. How do we know some of them are not the same people now in government trying to divide us in an attempt to recreate 2007? We can't tell because there was no catharsis. There was no self-reflection as a country intending to hold into account those people who murdered other Kenyans in 2007. So what we are saying here is whoever wants to be president need to promise us that they will bring impunity to an end. You can't take people's money, because if you try to analyze Uhuru Kenyatta's government, and there is already a case in court on this, he borrowed 6.1 trillion and authorized by parliament. That was a clear violation of law. But you see now, like my friend here, Churchill, is saying, we are now calling him a hero because I guess he is not in the office. What is the difference between Uhuru Kenyatta and William Ruto? Right now, if you ask me. Because personally, I just can't see it. I see William Ruto's government as in Jubilee phase 2. And if somebody were to ask me, I'll tell you, I never believed that Uhuru actually wanted Raila to be president. I think Uhuru's candidate was always William Ruto. Because
Interesting.
because what you need to do, look at his psychology, look at his mind when he was campaigning or allegedly pretending to campaign for Raila. He used to tell the people, Nyinyi mutanikumbuka. In his mind, Ruto has already become president. He was warned, he was telling them mutanikumbuka. He was not asking them to vote, prevent Ruto from being president.
Okay.
He was telling them, you will remember me. Because in his mind, William Ruto was already the president.
Interesting sentiments. We'll come back to you in a moment. Mr. Suba, let me talk to you about this issue of, demonstrations and, the right to assemble as per the Constitution. But there's concern. Of course, there's the right to picket and assemble in the Constitution, I think Article 37. But also there's concern about, the infiltration of these demonstrations by people who loot, their goons who infiltrate these demonstrations. And you talked about the loss of property. How do we safeguard the right to assemble, the right to picket, but also make sure that these demonstrations are not infiltrated? Because there are concerns that some of these goons are, hired by politicians to infiltrate these particular demonstrations. So how do we make sure we protect the right to demonstrate, but also ensure that these demonstrations are, free from these hired goons who infiltrate demonstrations, loot property, burn property and all?
To be fair to those who lost property and even the Kenyans who ventured out to express their outrage, first of all, in this particular issue of fuel, nobody had called for protest. Even the Matatu owners, all the federations, none of them
called for protest. They said to remove vehicles from the road.
So it was about withdrawing service.
It was about withdrawing service.
Okay.
Yeah.
But there will always be a group that takes advantage of such calls and ventures into the street, which is their democratic right. It is guaranteed under Article 37. I've already told you that I was the chairman, together with Cecil Mbarire, on the technical working group on Citizenship and Bill of Rights.
Okay.
But the Constitution sets the principle. The real detail of exercising that right is under the Public Order Act, a law that is pretty old, was first enacted in 1952, and you know what happened in 1952? The declaration of emergency and so on and so forth. So there are certain provisions in that law that do not align with the Constitution. And that's why I was very hopeful when the current government established that panel on compensation. Of course, a lot of Kenyans focused on the compensation. But one of the terms of reference for that panel was to help review the Public Order Act so that Kenyans can exercise the right to protest without the kind of excessive force we are seeing from the police, but also with some degree of responsibility.
Okay.
Unfortunately, that did not happen. There were court cases. The process is still on. The court ruled that, framework for compensation be developed by the Kenya National. That has since happened. We hope at some point they'll present their report. But we are also hopeful that this other term of reference of reviewing the Public Order Act in a manner that aligns and resonates with the provisions of Article 37 will not be lost in all these, court cases and litigations, so that it is done in a way that enables Kenyans to say, if you want to venture out, because yesterday those were not protests. What we saw, protesters are people who will carry placards, banners, proclaiming the message they want to get out there. But what we saw were running battles, looting, breaking into shops. Honestly, if the owners of the motor vehicles, like we saw in Naivasha, heeded the call by the associations to park their vehicles, and we saw trailers and lorries parked in Naivasha.
That is what they did, but also Kenyans, a section of Kenyans came out to decry the, because the hike in fuel prices.
And instead of, that's why I'm saying there was nothing wrong with that. But going to ban those very vehicles that their owners and drivers have parked, heeding the call by the associations, it's criminal.
There's something,
Churchill, and we cannot.
I think
as a society.
There's a critical question he's asking about.
Prof. You have been trying to reframe the questions he's asking. I got him very clearly.
Okay.
That yes, we have the right to protest, but that right to protest. In fact, if I were to read for you verbatim what Article 37 says, that every citizen has the right to peaceably and unarmed demonstrate, picket, and present petitions. Peaceably and unarmed. Meaning that if you do not meet the condition of being peaceful and unarmed, the law, the Public Order Act, ceases to protect you.
But let me ask, Mr. Suba.
And this is one message that we need to get. Before you ask me, allow me to send this message to Kenyans.
Because
that we cannot, as a country, one life, as he said, is too many to lose in the process of exercising a right. We cannot today say the 12 people were justified to die in the circumstances they did. And this is one thing that even a lot of my own civil society colleagues will never come to the station like this and say it. As one who has fought for rights for 35 years, let us exercise our right to protest while also respecting the rights. You showed it. I watched you when you were presenting news. You saw the sentiments in Busia. On the one hand, there are people who are besieged a police station. On the other, there are people who feel that their right to pursue the economic pursuits has been hindered. If somebody, police feel, for example, like in Busia, that somebody committed a crime. I was personally arrested 8 times. Prof here knows. He was my lecturer, he knows. I was held in Communicado 8 different occasions during Moi's regime. I came out alive. I'm still alive to date. Let the justice process take its course. Kenyans must respect that being held, what they should be fighting for is he being taken through the due process? Not going to a police station to demand that somebody be released.
There's that angle to it, Mr. Suba. But
we must.
Just a moment. There's the concern.
And the media is very powerful in this regard. I'm now appealing to you as my host today. And to the standard media group in general. We must help society get it right. That constitutional order that he's talking about can only be secured and obtained and realized if we all start from the right frame of mind.
Let me ask you, before I engage you, Prof, you've talked about Kenyans coming out to protest and, the looting of businesses and all. But again, sometimes the accusation falls on, these politicians, on the political class. For example, I'll take you back to last year when the commemorations for the June 24th demonstrations were happening. And we saw people who were working in tandem with the police, who had been hired to counter these protesters. We saw people looting businesses. So what happens when it is the political class who are hiring people to counter protesters, who end up probably looting properties and burning vehicles? What happens? Because in a way, they are protected. That is also connected to the issue of political goons, whom, we've seen a rise in political goonism in the past few weeks. And they cannot even be held accountable because they're connected to the powers that be. So how do we also solve that?
The problem, it becomes a conundrum when the very people who set out to protest have not conducted themselves differently from the so-called goons. If Kenyans agreed, and this is why I'm hopeful that we'll really get time to review the Public Order Act. And I've already admitted it is archaic. There are certain provisions there that are not in tandem with the Constitution. If we got it that way, then Kenyans will know when I've a right. And we have seen it in this country. There was a time when, during the Azimio protest of 2023, when Kenyans walked peacefully all the way from Kibra and other strongholds of Azimio to Kamkunji.
Still 76 of them were killed.
Not touching anything. No, there's a day when even the police could not find any reason to attack them.
But like he puts it, there people lost their lives.
Let me now come in.
I mean, in subsequent protests, in subsequent protests, people lost their lives.
Let me comment on this thing.
But I'm saying that for us as Kenyans to fully blame the law enforcement agency, let it be seen, you know, like the case of the mask vendor. You saw the outrage?
Okay.
The guy was innocent.
Let me tell you why.
Then police goes ahead to shoot.
This is why I think our problem lies.
Okay.
I think
Let him
the Kenyan government has not accepted the dictates under the Bill of Rights. The rights, and that they have not accepted it. Because if you look at it carefully, if the government accepts that people have a right to picket, there is procedures for that to inform the police that there won't be a demonstration in this place. And then the police is supposed to provide the security to you. This is a very strong state. This is not a very weak state. Instead of doing that, providing security, they will start telling us there's politicians who are hiring goons. You see, we have a National Intelligence Service. We have the CID. One function of the police is to prevent crime before it occurs. Of course, that is one of the functions. So we expect that any politician who has been good, those people are arrested even before we see them in the streets. Now, because the government has not accepted that people need to exercise right under Article 37, is always interrupting those demonstrations, and the people want to act to utilize that provision of the Constitution. Because of that interruption, they now give opportunity now for lawbreakers, quote unquote. Because if you look at it very carefully, like you correctly stated, those are not necessarily thugs, because if the thugs are standing with the police and they have those rungus, and the police is there and they are together, or like we saw politicians in Nairobi distributing money, hiring those people in order to interfere with the demonstrations, then now no more criminals. They get an entry to do that. So the solution to this thing, to enjoyment of that right, is the government to accept feeding back as normal. Because you see, when you want to demonstrate, you are not necessarily an enemy of the state. In fact, you are the friend of the state, because you are telling the state what it is doing wrong and what it ought to be doing right. So until we accept that, we are going to have problems with the implementation of Article 37, the provisions of the Public Order Act notwithstanding.
Okay, we're almost winding up this conversation, and let me ask Prof, because this is something that touches with NCAC, where you were a commissioner. NCAC is supposed to look at issues of that probably incite violence and all, and threaten peace and stability. This is a commission that is accused of applying the law selectively. At the moment, they want prosecutorial powers. I was speaking to the CEO, Mr. Daniel Mutegi, last month, and he says they also want prosecutorial powers. But again, when you look at how the commission has conducted itself, there are questions about it. For example, we've talked about this, and we've heard the CS for Interior, speak, and his sentiments, some argue, threatens violence in terms of ethnic violence.
Yeah.
But you will rarely see the commission summoning those in positions of power or those seemingly allied to the administration of the day. So the question would be, and Kenyans would probably argue and say, why then do we need to have this commission in place to begin with?
My experience is this, and I can draw this from the structure of the Constitution. The government is set in 3 pieces, normally. You have the executive, the judiciary, and the legislative. The idea is to create what is called the checks and balances. But the framers of this constitution went further than that. They actually attempted, and I think they succeeded, in creating a 4th arm of government. When all the other fail, then we can reach out to the independent commission to come to our help. Now, any public institution is as good as people who man it. Now, this is what has happened during Uhuru Kenyatta's time, and now it's happening during President Ruto's time. That instead of looking for independent-minded Kenyans to man these independent commissions, the first test you must pass is loyalty. Not to the country, not loyalty to the constitution, but the loyalty to the power that be. So people are recruited on that basis. And because they are recruited on that basis, they are not necessarily the best Kenyans in that institution. Before they take any action on anybody, they try to feel the appointing authority, where would that heart be? Where would the appointing authority would want me to behave? And then this is how they execute their mandate. That is why that commission, for example, which I served in, it disappeared as soon as we finished our term. You have never heard of it.
My views about my views about the commission.
Briefly, kindly. We are running out of time.
Briefly, my problem with the creation, of course, is one of the post-2007 because of course the mayhem we went through. But the problem was, and remains, that in countries where such commissions have been effective, you go through the entire stretch of the Truth, Justice and Reconciliation Commission. Here we have a commission that is like a cart that has been put ahead of the horse, and the horse is still expected to pull it. That's the problem with the NCIC, that we have not mastered enough courage as a country to face the recommendations of the TJRC and say, this is how we wronged each other, these were the people who are responsible, hold them to account, or ask them for forgiveness, and then accept as a country, as South Africa did, to move forward as one undivided entity. So we established a framework to help us do what we are not courageous enough, and that is what ails. It does not matter whether they are given.
So in short, NCIC is the same as ethics, is the same as any other commission, really. Okay. Because, I mean, with all the reports we see from Auditor General, surely, what would you say the ethics and the corruption is doing? So, as it is right now, Emperor shouldn't go. All these commissions, they are not serving any purpose, in my opinion. They have just expanded in government, but they are not able to deliver, like he said.
Gentlemen, I'll give you each, I think, at least a minute to give me your final submissions. And as you do that, there's one interesting thing that happened. When protesters were arrested on Monday, they were taken to Central Police Station. The officer commanding station for that particular station, Mr. Dishan Angoya, was arrested but released later on, unconditionally for that matter. But KTN has learned that he's being investigated by the Internal Affairs Unit of the police for what they term is bribery, the bribery claims. I don't know what you make of it.
Yes, of course, we watched the drama at a hospital in Langata. I saw my good friend Boniface Mwangi and colleagues and lawyers and so on. I think, yes, if I'm told, 64 people were released before they were processed or properly investigated or charges, leveled against them and so on. If you asked me, of course, I've seen even prison officers being arrested for negligence of prisoners escaping while in their custody and so on and so forth. I do not want to speculate, but I think if they are administrative. I've seen people argue, for example, that it is within its powers. For some of us who have been arrested before, we know that if you, for example, I used to be taken to Menengai Police Station, Central Police Station, Nakuru, and I used to be arrested by the special branch, what is today National Intelligence Service. The officers in charge of that station, they are all seemed at that time to be just to hold you there. If they were asked what you are doing, they say, no. This one was brought by this branch, and we will wait for them to tell us. And of course, at that time, there was no requirement of being processed and taken to court within 24 hours. If you asked me, and I've seen, elaboration of the circumstances under which those people were arrested and released, there could be some mistakes that the OCS made. There could be, because there are allegations of some of them having accosted the regional police officer. I mean, if you met me and accosted me, that's a crime. It does not matter less that that person who was accosted was a police officer. Remember, for us as human rights activists, rights accrue by virtue of one being a human being, and that regional police officer is also a human being deserving of his personal security. And so if those were the circumstances, then there could have been mistakes. I do not want to give him a blank check and say he had powers and so on. That would be, misleading. Let the OCS, is still the OCS, we have not heard that it's been interdicted, let him be processed within the appropriate mechanisms, if they are internal affairs unit.
Legal minds argue that he acted within the law.
That's what people who, legal minds come to court and still lose cases. So this thing of legal minds, no longer intimidate us. If you go to somebody as his lawyer in the circumstance where the OCS is, you will always say things that would get him out of the situation he is. But I'm telling you that, based on my own experience, if you are arrested by a CID, there'll always be a responsibility for arresting officer, investigating officer. I am just concerned about the period within which 64 people were arrested and released. Was there any reference to the arresting officer, to the investigating officer? That is where that investigation needs to focus.
Fair enough, thank you. Prof.
Let me say, the best thing, I think the best way it could have approached that was simply to say that it doesn't talk about the facts, because we actually don't. If we are under the facts, then we can tell whether the state is trying to play politics or not. But what I would like to say is this, that the people today, we have given the opportunity to serve us. I think they need to serve us without the tribe. They need to serve the people of Kenya as the people of Kenya. You see, I hear people talk, and mainly, unfortunately, and I'm going to be a little bit straight here, is many the Luos are here beating this tribal drum, and some Kalenjins beating the tribal drum. But when you look at the Kenya today, you look at the Kiambu here, it's now 25% Luo population. If you look, you go to Meru, or you go to any town now, there's no town now without a Kalenjin citizen. So what I'm saying here is the country is almost 45% integrated. You cannot create trouble for a single community in Kenya today without affecting the whole lot of us. So I just want to ask the people right now who have authority over us, because we conferred that authority to them, please leave us peacefully, the way you found us. Stop bringing in tribal issues in your job. Do your job. Okay, Shindra, stop blaming anyone. If there is an obstruction in your work, the law comes to your head. You get that person who is obstructing legally. But this business of condemning this tribe or that tribe, when you have authority, in fact, then in CAC Act will tell you that your statement will be taken very seriously because it has capacity for implementation. You see, there's somebody like me or him, you can say something and we ignore because who is going to implement it? But when you have that capacity for implementation of what you said, by someone else, it becomes very dangerous to the country.
Okay.
So they really should leave us peacefully, do your job. If you are stealing, please steal. If you are doing whatever it is, you are do it, but leave us in peace. We want our peace.
Okay, fair enough. Thank you very much, gentlemen, for making time to be with us this particular evening. Many thanks to our viewers for staying with us up to this particular moment in time. Until next time, do have yourself a wonderful night, and like always, God bless.
Thank you.